Welcome to the Student Recap Podcast, episode 35. Today I will be talking with my friend Jacob about international affairs. So to start off with, who are you?
Hi, my name is Jacob Bailey. I'm a junior at the John Cooper School, and I have an interest in international affairs. I'd say I started to become interested in how the world worked globally when I was a young kid. I grew up in an expat family, moving around. I've lived in England, Texas, Canada, Singapore, and my dad is now in Qatar, so I get to spend a lot of time in the Middle East. And me traveling and getting to have all these unique experiences really piqued my interest in the world and different cultures, customs, religions, and just how languages and all of it, and just how beautiful the world is, but also how it works interconnectedly.
So obviously culture is part of the way countries govern themselves and also relate to other nations. So with all the news that's happening in these times, why do you follow international events, even if they might seem like not relevant to your own life?
Sure. I think international event, first off, of course, it's just important for anyone to be a global citizen, to stay updated with the news and what's happening internationally as well as nationally. I think that's an important thing that everyone should be doing, regardless of if they have an interest in international relations, political science, or foreign affairs. But I really follow international events because of my kind of twofold reason. First, I have a love of travel, and I love getting to see new things and experience different cultures. So I want to learn about places I could go to, places I could be, what's happening in places of the world. And also, I've been so fortunate to get to travel all over. I think I hit 26 countries this year, and I think I'll be at 29 by the end of the year. But I've been to a lot of these places or the regions where they're happening, especially living in Southeast Asia. It was super interesting to see all the dynamic of what was happening. You know, right after, 2 years after our trip to Myanmar, after we were supposed to have a trip to Myanmar, the coup happened.
Yes.
I was in Singapore during the Hong Kong protests, and you just get such an international view and eye into these things, especially when you can relate to them from where you lived or what you've experienced. That's kind of why I follow international events.
Yeah, and more on Southeast Asia, you've actually mentioned to me that you've gone to Cambodia and to Angkor Wat. And that's actually historically significant, not only because of the ancient Angkor Empire, but also because of Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge, which took over Cambodia. So international affairs lets you have a lens into the past and see what that country is looking forward into the future. So Cambodia now, it has a booming tourism sector, and they're using that as an economy to spur themselves past from their dark history, which involved a lot of killing within the Cambodian genocide. And with you mentioning Hong Kong as well, you can also see the different cultural influences at play, because the British had a very heavy influence on Hong Kong, while the Chinese are now trying to reassert their control over the island, since they believe it should be more centralized. Mm-hmm. So obviously you're learning Spanish here at school, and how do you think learning different languages and history can help you in the international affairs field?
Well, I think you become, from an employee standpoint, you are valuable to your employer. You become 10 times as valuable as someone who can't, because you have the same skills as them, but you can also be in country somewhere. You can also understand the cultures and customs and be able to better understand what's driving motives behind certain things. I love how you touched on Cambodia, Hong Kong, that kind of thing. It's super interesting as well, if you have a language background, to be able to understand what a country's been through in the last 50 so years. You take Spain with Franco. You take Chile with
Allende and
Pinochet.
Mm-hmm.
And the world, of course, has some dark history, but it also has some beauty. And I don't know that you can understand either without a language. Personally, I've always been a big fan of taking a language. I took Mandarin in Singapore. and I've taken Spanish here, and I think that the more that you can, I really believe, and I love using it, and the more that you can use that language, I think the better it helps for job search, but also for making trustworthy connections with other people, for being culturally understanding, and more.
Yeah, and you mentioned certain languages allow you to have introspection, and that actually correlates to how certain languages, their words for certain cultural things, such as this was in a previous podcast actually, in Tahiti, there's so many different words for coconut because there's different uses for it. Now in English, it would all translate into coconut. Yet you can see the different perspectives of the people in Tahiti because they see things as the coconut has multiple uses, therefore it is many different things. Uh-huh. And slang, you can't always translate slang in Spanish or in French or any other language directly into another one because it wouldn't make sense. It's like if you said something that's in gibberish because the sentence wouldn't grammatically make sense and it wouldn't have logical sense either. Uh-huh. And with studying two languages myself, Spanish and French, I actually see the connections between the two languages since they're both Latin, but also some of the cultural ties that they have because some of their words for revolution or political affairs are very similar. Mm-hmm. And even in the Spanish world, there's certain things such as in Chile, like how they have a different word for corn because of the indigenous people that live there. Uh-huh. So it's really the people's experiences that shape how the language is. And what many people don't realize is that some languages in the very beginning, they were just, it wasn't one standard thing. Eventually, over the years, it became one language with rules and everything. Mm-hmm. Correct?
Right.
And so this brings me to my next point. So though there aren't many schools of learning for languages, there's obviously in Salamanca in Spain an Institute of Spanish, and in Oxford, England, an Institute of English. So how do you think languages can preserve cultures throughout history?
Well, I think first off, education is the first way to do so. You need to be bringing in new talent, new eyes, a new generation, frankly, of researchers, learners, archaeologists, any of it, to be able to preserve both current language as well as ancient language. And, for example, Navajo is a great example, a language that has died out over the last 400 years. Language is so important, I believe, not only for, as you talk about, with its own cultural and customary niches like slang or different words for a coconut or that kind of thing. But it also, it's, of course, our only way to communicate. And it's important that we continue to learn about the origins of each language and how that all fits together now.
And that highlights how even though generations of immigrants and other people might switch to English, for example, or might forget their cultural past, it's important to pass it down. Because, for example, in many nations in Africa, tribal languages are being forgotten because English lets them become a global citizen. Yet, if those countries were to preserve their languages better, then there would be a better outlook for those people. But currently, many countries don't value their indigenous languages. Even the United States doesn't have many programs for preserving native heritage. But it must be remembered that there's also the generational drift, because the younger generations that are splitting from their grandparents, there's definitely some familial disputes over, oh yeah, I want to go study in this other country to learn, but then the grandparents want them to stay in their home country. So it's very interpersonal. Would you agree?
I fully agree. I think, especially in America, it's quite saddening actually to think about how all the nativism in the 1800s and that continued into the 1900s with all the immigrants has led, unfortunately, a lot of people to abandon their native languages, their native tongues, in favor of English. As you say, English has turned into the language of the world. It's the language of business. It's the language of trade, of shipping, of anything. But it's a double-edged sword for sure.
Yeah, so with the double-edged sword, what you said is like there can be positives, but there's also drawbacks for some cultures because they're going to lose some of their most important tenets.
100%.
But next, how do you think that receiving a global education has broadened your opportunities in life? Because yes, you can stay in the same place your entire life and still have a lot of success, but how has it allowed you to see new horizons?
Well, I think it's both broadened my opportunities socially and academically. Socially, I have, as we've talked about, a desire, a passion, a want to travel. And that includes wanting to work as an expat, to live in a foreign country, to receive an education in a foreign country. All that stuff, I think, has made me a more global citizen, but that's due in part to how fortunate I was growing up and how fortunate I am, and the caliber of education and school, and most importantly, I believe, the value that my parents placed on all of that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm eternally in debt to them for prioritizing my education over other things. My family has a belief that we spend money on experiences, not on trinkets. And I think that is something I live by in terms of the international scene and just receiving a global education. I want to be exposed to as many interesting, different, quirky, blow my mind things as possible. And I think that has changed my life. Academically, I have always called myself, always kind of been referred to as the international kid.
Mm-hmm.
And that of course was sometimes a challenge growing up, and leaving a country every 3 years. But I wouldn't trade it for the world. I think that travel is just it's a remedy to almost any sickness.
Mm-hmm.
It's a remedy to racism. It's a remedy to anything. But especially all the polarization we see today, the bigotry, the xenophobia, all of that. I think in large part that's due to a lack of travel.
Mm-hmm.
And a lack of, maybe not a lack of travel, but a lack of
experiences
exchange
that really strengthen your ideas about the world. Because yes, an American can go to Paris, but are you really going to see all of France and the importance of its values?
Uh-huh.
This brings to light, obviously in your education, you've been to some pre-college programs where there's international students.
100%.
And seeing their perspectives of, one, coming to America, but also learning together with all these different people allows collective growth. And this has been through the centuries that societies don't progress if they don't have trade. Yes, you can grow, but you're not going to grow at the amount that you would with cross-cultural influences.
Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah, I fully agree with you there. One of my favorite memories is at my Georgetown Foreign Policy Academy, walking into my dorm room and meeting Alex, who was a foreign exchange student for the 3-week program from Shanghai. And I was able to bust out just a little bit of Mandarin I still remembered. And immediately, just like that, we were so much closer. We had a lot of different ideals. He was a Chinese national. I'm an American. We had so many interesting discussions about the One China policy, about Taiwan, any of it. We watched the U.S. presidential debate together, but we were able to be drawn to each other because we could be open and because we were able to bridge a cultural divide. And I think that's why people should consider learning more about the world. I really believe that there's so much gold out there. There's so many experiences and life-changing moments that are visible, but we just don't know how to look for them yet. And exposing yourself to as much as you can, I believe, really is the antidote for that. It's how you, not the antidote, but it's the medicine. Yeah,
and I truly agree with the idea that being interacting and like talking with people from different places stops polarization and transcends the divides that we create. Because sometimes we become too selfish and want things for ourselves. But when we see the growth that can happen when the world works together as a team, then there's so much more that is available. Obviously, one country can say, oh yeah, I don't want to interact with this other country because of this dispute I have with them. But then when they work together, then they can create a better world. And especially in COVID, many countries realize this, because if the world had not put together the resources to realize a method to combat the pandemic, we would have all been dead. But there had to be ideas from different places allowing for growth.
I agree. You bring up a great point about collaboration and open chains of communication, open channels of communication. I think that's an important thing that all countries need to be striving for to do their best. Of course, situations arise, conflicts happen, but I, for one, don't believe that the realist point of view of an isolationist nation, I think while it can be effective temporarily, I don't believe the greatest growth occurs then. I think, as you say, the collaboration, the free market principles, all of that is important.
Well, thank you for being on the Student Recap Podcast, and we'll see you guys later.
Thank you for having me.